All right. Okay. Am I audible? Mridunjay, am I audible?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
All right. Okay. Hello, everyone. Good evening and a very warm welcome to the virtual book launch of Design for a Better World by none other than Professor Don Nordman. My name is Amit. I'm the Dean of the School of Design at Flame University. My colleague, Professor Kumar, and I will be moderating this discussion today. We are absolutely thrilled to introduce this fascinating book, which explores the concept of how design can be used to make the world a better place. Thank you all for joining us today to celebrate the launch of this must-read book. Nishant, can you please play the video to unveil the book? Play from the start.
A world that is meaningful, sustainable, and humanity-centered. Designed for a better world.
I don't know if was everyone able to see the video and hear it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, from the audience attendees, was everyone able to see and hear the video? If I could get a quick kind of, hands raised for a yes.
Yes, I can see hands raised.
Okay, all right. So absolutely excited to unveil this book today, Professor Nordman. Professor Donald Nordman is a renowned design expert, cognitive scientist, and author of 21 books translated in 20 different languages, including the very famous The Design of Everyday Things and Emotional Design. He's also a former vice president at Apple, where he evangelized the terms user-centered and user experience. He's the co-founder of Nelson Norman Group and a distinguished professor emeritus at the University of California, San Diego. He received the Sir Mesha Black Award for Design Education in 2021, and we are very honored to have him as an advisory board member for the School of Design at Flame University. We are honored to have Professor Norman with us today. He'll be talking about the book Design for a Better World for the next 20-25 minutes, and later answer your questions in the Q&A section. Please share your questions with us, and we will take them later. Thank you so much, Professor Norman. The stage is yours.
Thank you, Amit.
Nishant, please highlight Professor Norman's video.
Thank you, Amit. I will talk for 5 minutes about my book, because what I wish to do is actually have a discussion with all of you. And that way you can ask me questions. And when I answer them, I know it is something that you are interested in. But it's very difficult to give a talk from such a distance where I have not met any of you. It is very difficult to know what you really care about. So that is why I no longer give long talks. I just give discussions where I must know that you really care about the answer. That's why you asked the question. So I have indeed, as Amit has said, written many books, mostly about how to make things that are easier to understand, easier to use, and more pleasurable, more enjoyable. And I think those books are important, but they're not going to change the world. And so I thought that it was time now that I changed what I am doing to talk about what is happening in the world today and what we designers can do about it. Now, at first glance, when you think about that, you say, oh, the world is a mess, but it's because of all the politicians. What can design do? And I say, no, that's not true. Because if you look at the world, it was actually designed, not by professional designers, but when politicians decide upon a new law, that's a design because they're changing something and they have a reason for doing it. when we invented the concept of a season, summer, winter, spring, fall. That's artificial. There aren't any seasons in nature. In fact, some countries in the world don't have seasons. Some countries only have 2. Some countries have 6. Why do we have 4, and why are they divided the way they are? Well, because astronomers thought it was kind of clever to make the difference between summer and winter and fall depend upon, how long the day was. Was it the longest day of the year? Okay, we switch seasons. Is it the shortest day of the year? Okay, we switch seasons. Are the day and the night equal? Okay, we switch seasons. Got nothing to do with the behavior of animals and plants. Well, it's got a little bit to do, but not much. And what about the week? Why is there a week? That's pretty arbitrary. Why are there 24-hour day in the days? 24 hours? That's arbitrary. When I look out the window where I live, everything I see is artificial. Even the plants and the palm trees and the birds and the animals and the rabbits and the hawks and the hummingbirds. They are real animals, but they live here because we've created an artificial habitat to allow them to live here. And I can see Mission Bay, which is a recreational area for water, but it used to be a swamp, so we transformed it. In the city of San Diego, I see the buildings, they're artificial. And I see in the distance the mountains of another country. I see the mountains of Mexico. But countries are artificial. The boundaries between countries and where they are and how they work is devised by people. So if it was designed by people, we have a chance to change it. Will it be easy? No. It takes decades to change human behavior. But that's why we need to start right away, because it takes so long, we better get started. And the world today is a mess. And one of the things I point out is climate change is here. And the bad news is that climate change is here and it's causing floods and fires and high windstorms. And it's causing people to go hungry. It's causing people to go without water and some people to go with too much water, flooded. That's the bad news. And the good news is that climate change is here and it's causing great harm to many people. And why is that good news? Because we've been talking about climate change for 20, 30 years and nobody has taken it seriously. But now that the harm is here, people are taking it seriously. So what can you do as a designer? Well, there are 2 things you can do. One of them is as a designer, and the other is as a person. Because as a person, we have to change the way that we all live. And this is a political issue. Politics is not a bad thing. Politics is in theory, what politics is when different people have different opinions and different points of view, they get together to work out the appropriate solution where they must all compromise. That's good politics. Doesn't always happen, but it often does. And what are politicians impacted by? Well, some of them want power, some of them want money, but in order to stay in power, they have to be voted. Who votes for them? You do. So when people gather together, people can change what goes on in a country. And this has happened in countries all over the world. When people are really upset with what is happening, if they gather together, they can change the way the country is run. Second, when we manufacture things, we destroy the environment. We destroy the environment to get the materials to make the things. We destroy the environment in the way that we use fossil fuels to run our factories. We have dark smoke coming out of the smokestacks, that's polluting the air. We have waste that goes out into the water or into the land that's polluting the land and the water. Why are we doing that? And here's where design plays a role. Designers are designing these things that require these minerals, that require this kind of process. So designers have a chance to change it, but they can't, because design today is in the middle level of things in the university and in companies. No one ever thinks of asking the designer what the company should do. Why not? Well, that's your problem. I want you to solve that. I want you to get promoted. I want you to become the leaders of companies. And you can do it. What you have to do is think more broadly. If all you do is think about design, then you're not going to get promoted. Because a company needs people at the top who think hard about what is good for the company, what is good for the nation, what is good for the world. And you have to be able to do this in a way that makes sense to the executives at the top. So when I was an executive, I did not want people coming to me telling me we were doing things wrong and this is a problem or that's a problem. Not because I didn't want to hear about it, but because I didn't have to have more problems. I needed to have more solutions. So I looked for people who would give me a solution, but a solution that made good sense for everybody. Now, a lot of the waste that we do in companies is actually wasting money. When we waste resources, when we have black smoke, well, that's wasted things going out of the air. And when we have pollution, that's waste material. And if we change what we're manufacturing, guess what? We can be better for everybody. We don't waste so much money and we don't destroy the world. So there are many, many other things I could say, but that's the beginning. And that's actually what caused me to rethink how we write the book, except for one other point I'll make. Colonialism. Colonialism is when the powers of big countries, primarily the countries of Europe, but I include the United States as a part of Europe in this case, would go and find these other countries, for example, India, and say, the British came into India and said, oh, let us help you rule your country, and we'll show you how to do it right. No. Well, designers are colonialists as well, too, because designers often go into a community and say, oh, you lack fresh water, or you lack good sanitation, or you lack something, and here's what we will do for you. That doesn't work. Nobody likes to be told by an outsider what to do. So we have to change design. So human-centered design, which is an approach that I help champion, does not work when we are talking about trying to make communities better. Because human-centered design focuses upon the person, focuses upon trying to make something that the person can use and understand. But it doesn't talk about at all about how it's manufactured, about what materials are used, about how it can be repaired, about the harm it might do to the environment. And so I now say that is too short-sighted. We must use humanity-centered design, where we think about the total impact on all people, all animals, all living things, and the environment itself, because all of those impact our lives. And so we must have a much broader system point of view, humanity-centered. That's the book.
All right. Wow. I mean, in such a short span of time, you were able to kind of, ignite so many amazing thoughts and so many points of discussion, I'm sure. I will request the audience, if they have any questions to begin with, you can post in the Q&A section. So Professor Kumar, do you have something interesting question already that you want to ask?
Yes, absolutely. First of all, thank you, Professor Norman, for this wonderful talk. I think this was a much needed book and should have been released quite a long time ago. And I completely agree with you that it's a high time for all of us as designers to come together and be the agents of change for the betterment of the humanities. So I have had an opportunity to read your book. And my first question to you is, you mentioned that the need for the designers is to rethink their roles and activities in order to address complex problems. So what specific skills or competencies do you think designers need to develop in order to be effective agents of change?
Well, first of all, the way we teach in universities is wrong. In fact, in schools, we teach people to work by themselves. We grade them on how well they do something all by themselves. We don't allow them to copy from other people. That's called cheating. But in the real world, nothing complex is done by a single person. It's done by groups of people. Nothing is done by yourself. But I like to point out, if you work for a company and an executive comes to you and says, what's all this chat GTP stuff? I don't understand it. Would you explain it to me? I want a short 2 or 3 page paper that sort of I can quickly read and understand. And you say, oh, well, sure, okay, yes, sir. But you don't know how to write it either. So what should you do? Well, you should ask your friends, your colleagues. You should ask them if they've written something that you could borrow. You should go on the internet and look for good papers and look for good analyses and find people that you can talk to. And you should borrow from all their works and put together a very nice little short paper for your supervisor. Now, in some sense, that's what I do in my books. I gather information and knowledge from all around the world. I read many, many books. I talk to many, many people. And I travel around the world and visit people and see what is happening and see what is going on. And I put it together. And what is good about my books is not the things that I have said. What I contribute to the books is the way I put it together, the framework I give. And, there's very little that's actually new, brand new discoveries. What really is new is when people take all the stuff that has been known up to then and put it together in a novel way. So I want universities to train you to work in groups, and not just groups of designers. Design people tell me, oh, yes, we do projects together. We get a group of designers together. We all work together. We learn how to work together. And I say, well, that's good. But it's not enough, because in a company, you have to learn to work not with just other designers. Industrial designers have to work with interaction designers who have to work with graphic designers, none of whom understands what the others do, by the way. But you also have to work with people from marketing, from people from business, people from technology, from engineering. You have to work with social scientists, because when we design things, we're designing it for people, so we better understand people. And who best understands people? Not departments of psychology, not departments of social sciences. The people who understand best are writers. If somebody writes a novel, they have to give a story about that feels real. So you understand how people react, how people think, how people might conspire against one another, or maybe team up with other people. You have to understand human behavior in order to do the writing. So it isn't enough to know the technology. You must also know the arts. And we must change education. And so we've been talking about that with Flame, actually, the need to do multidisciplinary education. And I think that instead of having departments, we want to have projects, project-based education. Because if you want to do something real, then you have to cut across all these knowledge. Now, the problem is that in universities, well, you have a semester system, which is only 15 weeks. So you can't really do very much. So I say, why not do a real project? It might take 4 or 5 years. And the class works on it for 15 weeks and then stops. And then when the next class comes in, it continues with an earlier class left off. And maybe some students from the earlier class become mentors, teaching assistants in the next class to keep the continuity. But then, not only that, but it's when you're a student, that's much more exciting than listening to lectures and reading books, because you see how your knowledge is actually being applied. So we need to change the educational system, because we need to change the way that people think, to think more broadly, and that will allow people like you to get promoted and become leaders of the world.
Certainly, and absolutely, I agree with you, Professor Norman. And I think it's very interesting to bring in different stakeholders from different disciplines to collaborate together and work on the real-world challenges to come up with better humanities-centered design solutions. So I can see a lot of questions in the chat. Professor Kundal?
I will follow up a couple of questions. So we have a question from, I think it's Professor Bala, your old friend from JKLU in Jaipur. So he wants to understand, what do you think about Planet Centric Design? Isn't that more relevant than humanity-centric design?
Hey, this is meant to be for students, not for professors, but okay. I haven't been to Jaipur yet. Actually, I haven't been to Pune either. And I have to visit because I've had contacts with both the university, the Institute of Design in Jaipur, and of course, Flame in Pune. I'm sorry, repeat the question. I just got lost that. Just give
So the
me one
question is,
example, please.
what do you think about planet centric design?
Yeah, got
Isn't
it.
that more relevant?
Got it.
Yeah.
Look, the people who are arguing for planet-centered design and the people like me who are arguing for humanity-centered design, and there are a few other people with different other names, it's all the same. Because look, I want to have a very short phrase that indicates what I'm doing. So say 3 words, but one of the words is design. And maybe the second word is centered. So I only have a choice of 1 word. What do I choose? Some people say planetary, some people say, society, some people say humanity, but you can't choose 1 word that is satisfactory for all the meanings. So what's really important is not the words we've chosen, but what you mean behind it. And it's planetary-centered design and what I am calling humanity-centered design are exactly the same thing.
Got it. To follow up another question that we have, so we have a question from Mukesh Patel. What role will artificial intelligence play from the design perspective in the future of humanity?
Mm-hmm. Yes, you're giving me the easy questions first. Technology has been critical in our advances over time. We can't live without technology. We couldn't survive anymore without technology. And new technologies always have a big impact on how we behave and what we do. And so it also is harmful in many ways as well as beneficial. There's a phrase in English called Luddites. We say somebody is a Luddite when we think that they do not like technology. They hate it, they destroy it. Well, that's not true. There was a man named Ludd in the 1700s in England when the Industrial Revolution started, and England was starting to do the very first manufacture of clothing, of cloth, actually. But Ludd and his followers were weavers, and they used to weave at home, hand weave. And they were afraid that these new factories would cause them to lose their jobs. And that's why they had a revolt to try to change things and try to destroy the automatic weaving machines. So Luddites were people who were afraid of losing their jobs. And the truth is they did lose their jobs. They were correct to be concerned. But if you take a look at the benefit of being able to manufacture cloth, it has been worldwide wonderful because it allowed the clothing to be much less expensive and available to everybody across the world. Now, there's other harms too. In fact, India played a role because the British took the cotton from India and that's how Britain started in India, in cotton growing and things like that, in order to feed the manufacturing centers in England. But ignoring that for the moment, the problem is that all these technologies do good and also harm. Now, for the first time, we have a different kind of technology, a technology that appears to be thinking, to take away the jobs of people who do not manual work, but who do mental work, cognitive work. Now, these machines don't think. You have to remember that artificial intelligence, AI, that A, remember it stands for artificial. Machines don't think. And this particular machine that exists today is based on neural networks. And actually, neural networks were discovered partially in my laboratory at the University of California, San Diego. And one of the students we had, Jeffrey Hinton, is now called the founder of modern neural networks. They don't have any understanding. What they do is they match patterns. And so when they put together a sentence in whatever language they are speaking, it makes good sense, it's coherent, but it can often be nonsense. So it's very powerful, but it doesn't have any understanding of what it is saying, what it is printing, or what picture it is drawing. So here's what I think will happen. Here's an example. Some friends of mine wrote a paper for a conference, the Computer Human Interaction Conference, the CHI conference. and it was about 12 pages long, and they sent it to me. They wanted my opinion. It was about technology for the aging population, and I'm one of the aging population, so I'm 87 years old. So obviously I'm old and feeble and I need help. And so, but it was a very long paper and I didn't feel like reading it. So what I did was I took the paper and I put it into Chat GTP. And I said, tell me what this paper is about in 200 words. And it did it. And I read that, and I actually read the paper also, and I compared, and I said, that was a pretty good summary. So I sent it to the people who wrote the paper and said, look what I asked. I asked Chat, and here's what it said. And they said, well, that's a good summary, but it's really not it's not a good abstract. It lost some of the most important points of the paper. And I said, good, that's a good thing. That's how Chat is that's how these tools will be used. Because, people don't like to write abstracts. You've written a paper and you're all finished, and then somebody says, but you need to have an abstract at the beginning. Most people hate to write that. And as a result, most of the abstracts are not very good. So I give it to Chat to say, write the abstract. And then I look at it and I say, well, it's pretty good, but it's missing important points. Okay, that's called collaboration. I asked somebody else to do something, and it was a good start, but it wasn't really excellent. So I'm going to make it better, because it's much easier for me to make a good thing out of something that somebody has started than for me to start from nothing. And so I will change what is in Chat, what is in the abstract, and maybe I'll send it back to Chat and say, can you make it better? And it might. And I go back and forth. So I feel that a lot of these tools are going to be collaborative. And I can give you other examples, but in the design field, we have lots and lots of intelligent machines now that are helping us do our designs. They help us, they make sure that when you draw something and design a physical product, that it actually can work, that actually everything matches. And while you're doing it, it also makes a part list and looks at the cost of each item and tells you what the item will cost. And if it has to be strong or whatever, it tells you how much it will weigh and how strong it is, and it will do tests. And with modern 3D printing, it's very difficult for a person to know how you can reduce the weight and keep the strength by reducing some stuff in the middle of the material, but the machine can do that. And so it makes you a better designer. It can't do it by itself, and you can't do it by yourself. It's a combination that's going to be powerful. Now, there are a lot more I can say about this, and it's not going to be an easy task. And there's all sorts of problems with today's technology. But remember, this artificial intelligence is very, very young. We're at the very beginning. So it's not surprising that it can be awful sometimes. But I think we'll learn how to work with it. And you want to be experimenting already at school. Professors are saying, oh, it's horrible, because I asked people to write an essay and then they give it to this machine and I don't know who did it. And I'm saying, come on, they'll be writing better essays as a result. It's just like asking a friend, if somebody cheats and asks a friend, well, we're cheating and asking a machine. What I say is we should encourage people to cheat. But because I want them to do it, they must also give credit. They must also say, this came from Amit. This came from Kumar. This came from Chat GTP. But I put the pieces together in an important new way that gives you new insight. So that's what I think of AI. I think, yes, it will cause harm. Yes, some people will lose their jobs. That's unfortunate. We should work on that. But yes, I think it will make for a better world.
Nice. We can go on and on about this topic for discussion. Another question from one of my young students is about what are the ethical considerations that designers should consider while designing products and services?
Almost every single discipline has an ethical framework. If you are an engineer, there's a set of ethics that you must follow. And if you want to be licensed as an engineer, you You have to understand those ethics and you have to approve of them. You have to demonstrate that you understand the ethical situations. Design is one of the few disciplines that does not have a body of ethics. And I think that's a serious error. But ethics is so important that it should not be taught in a course. Ethics should be taught in all the courses. So as you are doing your work, you should take into account the implications of what you are doing. And you should discuss that in class because it is too important to be in a single course. You take a course and you can ignore it. You get a good grade in the course and then you don't have to think about it ever again. But it's so important, it should be in all the courses where you must always think about the ethical implications of what you are doing. And it is time that the field of design sat down and developed a set of ethical principles that designers should follow.
Got it. Another young design student, designer, Urvi, she wants to understand that you mentioned that as designers, we should think broader and do more than design in companies for promotion and for taking a lead. Do you have any recommendations on how to go about it, especially in companies that are not design centric?
See, I don't think design is often thought of as making of devices, making things beautiful. That's not how I think of design. I think of design as a way of thinking, a way that you can approach any problem. Because we learn things in design. If you take a look at the principles of both human-centered design and humanity-centered design, because humanity-centered design principles are based on human-centered design, so there's a big overlap. The first one is, we're going to design for people. It's interesting, no other discipline designs for people. The engineers design to make it work physically. No, we want to make it work. You're absolutely right. The engineers are very important, but it has to be usable by people. And it has to not destroy the environment while doing that. And so that's one of the first principles. The second principle is, what is the real problem? When you're asked to design something, I have a rule. I never do what I'm asked to do because I ask, why is that? And so when we're given a task to do, we try to say, well, what are we really trying to accomplish here? And if we find the underlying reason and solve that one, we do a better job. It's much better for everybody. The third principle is we have to take a look at the whole system. We have to understand the manufacturing process, the supply chain requirements, the delivery requirements, the service requirements, repairing, and then final disposal. So ideally, we should champion what's called the circular economy, which is how nature works. When a plant grows in nature and it finally dies, or when an animal dies, its bodies, whether animal or plant, becomes fertilizer and useful for the growing of the next group of plants. Nothing is wasted. We have to learn to do that in manufacturing. And I spend a lot of time with that in the book. And there are many foundations whose sole focus is to cause companies to switch to a circular economy where we don't have any waste products. So there's a lot that we can do as designers because we're a way of thinking. So now what you have to do is you have to get up to the point where you can demonstrate this way of thinking is useful for the company you're working for. That will take a while, but they have to stop thinking of you as a designer and start thinking of you as an executive, as a manager moving up who thinks broadly. But by the way, how do you think engineers get promoted? Because engineers are the same thing. They are specialized. They understand their special tasks, whatever kind of engineering they are, electrical engineering, civil engineering, mechanical engineering, computer science. They don't get promoted because they're a great programmer or great at their engineering. They get promoted because they're starting to take a larger view of what they are doing and why they are doing it and how that benefits the company. And as I said earlier, the company, the country, the world. So that's what we must do. Take that broader view. Other people do it. Other fields do it. Designers seldom do.
Nice. I have another interesting question. How does one champion the concept of humanity-centered design in a corporate setting?
I think I just answered that. Because one thing you do, so a good friend of mine who years ago started championing all of this, he told me once, he started a place that's called the Rocky Mountain Institute. Today it's called RMI. And if you look at RMI's website, it's filled with really good examples and good case studies and good principles to make for better designs. He said, you cannot convince executives they should do something because it's good for the country or good for the world. You might even convince them, and they might even start. But as soon as the economic situation of the country or the world changes, it will stop. Or the executive might leave and a new one comes in and says, why are we doing this? You can't do it because it's good to do, because that sometimes conflicts with the business process. So what you have to do is convince them they are wasting money by the way they are operating. So if you look at all this junk that comes out of a factory that is thrown away on the earth, well, why are you throwing it away? Isn't there a use you could have made for it? And so he shows them how by doing good practices, they actually save money. So take packaging, the way you package the stuff that you mail from so it used to be very elaborate packaging, which people, when they opened the package, they would throw the package away. Why can't you save it and use it for something else, or give it to a location that can repackage it, use that material for this different purpose, or maybe the same purpose for other people? And again, it was people agreed that they should do this, but they stopped as soon as costs went up. But if they're saving money, they won't stop. So again, you have to have a solution that works. Now, there are some cases where you can't do that. Let us take automobile safety. Any safety, transportation. It could be a motorcycle, it could be a rickshaw, it could be an automobile. When I look at the driving in India, to me, it's pretty chaotic. Drivers are going on both sides of the street. Motorcycles are weaving in and out, going onto the sidewalk, going back to the street. So basically, when you drive in India, you look for any empty space and you put your car there. It doesn't matter whether that's really supposed to be or not. Well, we could change that, but the way it has to be changed basically is through laws. Because if you take a look at making automobiles safer, it's going to increase the cost of automobiles to put in safety features. And so if one company tries to do this, yes, it's a safer automobile, but they have to charge more money for it. And that is not going to be good because people won't buy it. They'll buy the cheaper one. But if the government says all motorcycles, all motor vehicles of any sort have to follow the following safety standards, then everybody has the same thing they must do. And that way they'll have to do it. So sometimes it is the way to get things properly done is to have the government help you and say, this is required.
All right. I have another question. A student wants to know that how does critical thinking ability help when coupled with the design thinking skill set?
What is design thinking?
That is another question that someone has asked. They want to understand that, this concept of design thinking. I think this is Adesh's question, that with this massive increase of, let's say quick courses around design thinking, there's a lot of, term design thinking being used and essentially used to magnify the concept of design, right? So what is your opinion about the world of design thinking in the current shape and form, and how it was envisioned maybe through Victor Papanek and you yourself championing it?
Design thinking is all that I've been talking about. It incorporates the way that we should take a broader point of view. We should think about humanity, or if you will, the planet. We should think about our manufacturing processes and where the materials come from. And if you're doing digital design, don't think that you don't have to worry about it, because anything that you do that's going to be run on a computer, well, what's a computer? A computer is a physical device. And where does it get its power from? From power plants that are fueled by coal or by oil, polluting the atmosphere? No. And are you addicting people to social networks and to doing, wasting their time and their energy and their intelligence? So, but design thinking is taking this broad point of view. Now, my friends in Stanford, Palo Alto, California, in the United States, decided that that people thought the designers were making something that was pretty. And that, in fact, in a company, you were never called in to decide what the product ought to be, because the company executives would say, well, that's not what you do. We'll call you in when we're all finished with the product so you can make it pretty and attractive. And they said, we want to change that. So they said, why don't we try to tell people that we actually we think differently, and the way we think is important. So they took the phrase design thinking, which designers had used for 50 or 100 years already, and they tried to make it popular. And they had these wonderful courses where you learn the creative part of design thinking. And people love those courses. They enjoy them very much. But it's not what design thinking is about. That's only one small piece. And you actually talk to people who have taken these courses and ask them about it, they say, it was the most exciting course I've ever taken in my life. But then you ask them, okay, and how did that change the company where you work? Or how did that change the work that you do? And the answer is, oh, no difference at all. Because it's too shallow. I can teach you those principles quickly, but to be a good designer takes years of study and years of doing, practicing. And what is left, what is forgotten in design thinking is it doesn't matter what you design. Those don't matter. You can win prizes, but so what? What matters is what you do. What did you accomplish? Did you make a difference in the world? So building and creating is what's really important. And so designers, right, today, they design something and they pass it on to manufacturing and other people to actually finish doing it. Or if it's digital, you pass it to your programmers and computer scientists. No, that's wrong. You have to be part of the whole sequence. You should make them part of the design as well, so you know what their requirements are. And then you have to follow, so that when they're having trouble and they can't do what you wish they would do, you'd say, oh yeah, I see you're right. Let me think of a better way for you. So design thinking is much, much broader than what people are saying. And it's much more important. So in many ways, the people in California did a good service, because now people think that designers are to think in a special way, but they did a bad service because they thought, oh, I can learn in 2 or 3 days. I can learn how to do it by myself. No, you can't. And I think that answers 3 or 4 of your different questions.
Absolutely, it does.
So I had one question, Professor Norman. You mentioned in your book that sustainability means maintaining the current status indefinitely, right? However, given that our planet is constantly changing and evolving, is it really possible to maintain a stable state of life indefinitely? And how do we balance the need for stability with the reality of change?
Yes, the world is a dynamic place where all sorts of things are happening, and many of which are not under our control. So we have to always be changing. The world is not constant. The environment is changing. We have big eruptions in the sun, sunspots and sun flares, which eventually come to Earth and maybe damage communication process or change the temperatures. And the climate is something we cannot control. And so whatever we do, we are most continually doing it. But that's not unusual. I mean, if you look throughout history, take the role of farming. Farming has changed its practices over time, many, many different times, because as the weather patterns change, you have to change the kinds of crops you're growing. as the water levels change or as everything changes, you must change what you're doing. So yes, we can never do something and then be content and say we can now relax.
Yeah.
But that gives us something to do. It gives us purpose, gives us meaning in our lives. And I think that's the fact that we must continually be changing. That's not a bad idea. And because we are also very inventive, we're always inventing new things. We're great inventors, human beings. And we invent new ways of doing things, new ideas, new ways of thinking, new ways of behaving. So yes, we're always dynamically changing.
Thank you. Thank you for this.
We have another question. So we'll take a couple of more questions before we conclude. How can we balance the need for innovation with the need to preserve traditional knowledge and practices that have sustained human societies for centuries?
That's an excellent question, because we have a history. Human beings have a history, and different cultures have different histories. And that history is very important. It makes us who we are. And I think that it is bad that the Western countries of the world have come in and tried to make everybody be the same, follow the same laws, the same behavior, train the same way. Actually, this is a good example, because the design profession, whenever I travel around the world and visit design schools all around the world, they're all the same. And why? Well, because designers are all trained in the same books, in the same tradition. They've all been trained in the European methods. They often, many of you have gone to schools in Europe or the United States or Canada, and you're learning the same things. And so now your own universities are following the practices that we do in the United States, for example. It used to be, when I traveled, I'd love to go to different communities and see the different shops and the different things in the stores and the different kinds of foods. Fortunately, the foods are staying somewhat the same, but the other ones, it was so interesting to see the differences. And today I don't do that anymore because there aren't any differences. So for a while, I used to take pictures. I would take pictures of say, the stalls in a street, and I would show it to an audience, and I would say, what country is this? And they would say, oh, it's obviously India. And I would say, no, it's actually Washington, United States. Or what country is this? And I show them fancy stores, and they would say, oh, that's Paris. And I'd say, no, it's Seoul, Korea. And you couldn't tell, and the life was the same, and it was dull. So first of all, I want to think that we should not throw away our past. But second, we shouldn't just do the past, because the world changes and there are new opportunities and new exciting things that people can do. So we want to build new things, new innovation. And the question, though, is how do you find the right mix and balance? And the answer is, I don't know. And that I leave to you. By you, I mean not the professors in the audience, I mean the students in the audience, because you're the ones who are going to grow up and you're the ones who are going to have to make these decisions. So many of the difficult problems we are facing today, like the role of artificial intelligence and new kinds of technologies in our lives, or what is the balance between honoring our history and our past and moving forward with new exciting ideas, that is something that is up to you to decide.
Thank you so much. I'm going to take another question from a design professor. So Shamit wants to know that design is being taught now at various levels, at high school level, at an undergrad level, at a postgrad level, and of course at the PhD level. Therefore, what is the relationship of age of a learner and their ability to learn and absorb human-centered design principles? And should designers or should educators consider that when planning the design education curriculum?
Well, the first answer is yes to your last statement. But there are many of us who think that the way that we approach problems, focusing upon people, solving the core underlying issues, and thinking about the implications for all of humanity are so important and so critical, everybody should learn them. And so we think that actually teaching this in the elementary schools, in the high schools, is very important. And in the city in which I live, San Diego, California, there are many schools that have already started to do this. There are some schools that have based their entire curriculum from when the young child enters at the age of 4 years or 5 years till they graduate. They are always doing design projects in their classes and learning to take into account all of these different factors. So instead of having a class in arithmetic and another class in, I don't know, social studies and another class in literature or writing, they are combined. And they are learning to think about this, not separate branches of knowledge, but how it all comes together to make, humanity. So I really think that we ought to move design up from a specialized course so that there are some fundamentals that everybody ought to know. Just like there are a whole bunch of new fundamentals that people used to know. We didn't used to think people had to know about computers and electronics, but today you need to, because it's so important in our lives. You don't need to be an expert, but you need to understand what computers are capable of doing, what technology is about, what history teaches us, and we learn from history, and how you put it together. That's where designers come in. So I think I don't think we have to necessarily increase the numbers of courses, because by combining all of this into one course where we're doing projects all the time, we automatically are introducing designers and technologists and people from literature and the arts, people from the engineering and technology and science. So that's what I think.
Unfortunately, we're going to run out of time, so we won't be able to take all the questions. I'm going to take one last question, and that I think is one of our design students. So Shruti wants to know, she says, thank you for a wonderful talk, sir. And of course, thank you for being an advisory board member to our university. How do you see Flame University's BTech program positioned for the future?
Well, it's a young program. And so it's much too early to judge. In fact, as I was commenting to you a few days ago, when I used to be looking at the program, I had talked to you earlier about what a degree program should look like, but I didn't see any degree programs in the website. It was all, you just had a minor. And now you have established a major in design, but design is a big topic. There are many different kinds of designers. It's like saying, I want to major in engineering. No, you actually cannot major in engineering. You have to decide what kind of engineering you want to major in. So it's a bit too early to judge what is going on at Flame, but it's a good beginning. And what will the future be? Well, you can now have a design major. Okay, except you heard me say earlier that maybe we shouldn't have majors. Maybe we should combine and have multidisciplinary projects and so on. Now, we still need people who are specialists. We need people who are experts in doing programming, experts in doing marketing, experts in doing writing, experts in doing communication, experts in doing design. But we also need the generalists who put it all together. That's what I see the future is, combining this generalist skills, which is what we need in design, with the specialist skills. And that's, the designers have to know about all those specialties, because when we build anything, create something, we have to take all the knowledge from the specialties and put them together. And that's the kind of future I would hope that a new university like Flame University can actually start to create. So let me pause by telling you something that I'm going to be working on.
Please.
I believe it's very important that we be using design to change the world for the better, to improve the world. And so I want to issue and I have gathered together a bunch of my friends to try to issue a new prize for people who do this, but not for famous old designers. No, I want to reward people like the students in the audience, young people, what I'm calling early career individuals, who probably after you've graduated, but not necessarily. But while you're doing your first or second, the first few years, do you have an idea that can help humanity? It isn't enough, though, to say you have a great idea. You have to prove that it actually does something. So you have to actually have built something and tested it in the group, with the people that you are trying to help. And these people, I want to encourage you and reward you. And so we're hoping to have an international award process by which we find good people who are doing some really interesting things that look like they're going to help change the world. And we reward them. And we also want to reward the universities that are teaching people to do this, because we want to have universities, more and more universities teach this. It's very rare now to have a university do this. I'm hoping Flame is one of them. And we want a conference as well, because there's no place where all the people thinking this can meet together and learn from each other. So that's what I'm working on now, to try to establish this fairly large and ambitious project.
Absolutely, and you have all the support from our university and us. Well, unfortunately, that's all the time that we have for today. Professor Norman, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your insights about design for a better world. It's been a real pleasure to have you with us, and I'm sure everyone in the audience has learned a lot from you today. To all of you,
thank you for inviting me. Yes.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much. Pleasure is ours, and it's been an honor, absolutely. And to all of you who joined us, thank you for being a part of this virtual book launch event. I hope you enjoyed the conversation and you'll consider picking up a copy of the book to learn more about how design can help us build a better future for all. I'll request Nishant to share the link of the book in the chat. You'll also have Professor Kumar and my email ID in case you want to kind of discuss something about this topic, which I could be a mediator between you and Professor Norman, or anything that you want to have a conversation just with us about design or anything else. Have a great day, Professor Norman, and I will see you soon the next time. A great evening to everyone in the audience. Looking forward to seeing you in future for more such interesting and engaging conversations. Thank you everyone for who helped us put this together. Anju, Nishant, Rohan, Shikha, Pradum, Roshni. Good night and have a great weekend. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you, Professor Norman. See you.